I'm Kristen, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm here with my March mid-month reading wrap-up. So we're now halfway through March and I have read 24 books so far for this month. So I'm going to quickly go through all of the books, let you know what they're about, my thoughts, my ratings, all of those things. Of course, if you ever want to see more of my thoughts or my full reviews on any of the books that I do read, I do review every book that I read. I review them on Goodreads. You can always get to that through the description of the video. It's always linked below. So definitely check that out if you ever want to see more of my thoughts. All right, so my reading has not been that great for the past month and a half. I think I've been pretty honest about that in multiple places. So I think if you have seen me talk about it on Instagram, you've watched some of my other videos, you already know that. But yeah, I just want to preface it with that. So it definitely hasn't been the best reading month for me. I haven't had any 5-star romances in the 24 books that I've read. I did have a 5-star, it was historical fiction, which we will start off with. But yeah, the rest have just been kind of mediocre, sadly. Some even worse than that for me. So yeah, we're just gonna get into them. First up is The Women by Kristen. So this is the historical fiction that I mentioned that I gave 5 stars to. This one I absolutely loved. Kristen Hanna, her historical fictions always just work for me so well, and I was very excited for this new release from her. I just always love the way that she writes her books, writes her stories. They're just so memorable and stick with you. Like the title suggests, in the story we follow women, or a particular woman. We're following her story. It's during Vietnam War and kind of her going and becoming a nurse for the war and going over there. And it's kind of her story, but also many women's stories who served in the Vietnam War and never received not only like recognition for their part in the war, but also like any help after the fact, any assistance, any counseling, therapy, any of those type of things. So yeah, it is set around the war, so we have a lot of like PTSD and traumatic things happening and all of that. And this book was just so beautiful and so good. Kristen Hanna, she's just like magic with historical fictions, and this one is definitely one you should check out. Next up is Blitz by Devy. I had an arc of this one, and this one I ended up giving, I think, 3.5/4 stars. So this is a sports romance. This is actually the second book in her Treasure State Wildcats series. So the first book was Coach last year. I absolutely loved that one. And actually all of her releases since then have been kind of a letdown for me. So they just don't hit the same like her books used to. So this one I had actually forgotten that I even requested an arc last year. So when I got it, it was a bit of a surprise. And so I decided to jump in and give it a try. This one is a sports romance with the hero being a coach for the college football team. He's like an assistant coach, I think. And then the heroine as well is a volleyball player for the college. So their romance is forbidden as well because coaches and students of the school or athletes of the school are not to be in a relationship or have any like relations like that. And so these two actually meet at the beginning of the story when he's hosting a house party. It's like the 4th of July, I want to say. And so she's at the party and he doesn't know her, but he's like taken with her immediately. And so she's kind of into him as well and ends up staying after the party to kind of help clean up and things like that. And so they kind of hook up from there. And then we cut to, that's like in the summer. So we cut to later in the school year when the school year starts up, and they end up meeting each other again back at the college where again, he's the football coach and she is a volleyball student athlete at the school. And so forbidden. So they kind of stay away from each other a lot of the times because they're not trying to like break the rules and things like that. But of course they're kind of pulled towards one another. They also quickly realize that she is his neighbor as well. She moved into the house next door. So they have that forced proximity and kind of can't get away from one another, whether at the school or also at their houses. So we have that whole thing going on. There is age gap as well with the hero being older. The heroine as well is kind of dealing with trying to figure out what she wants to do with her life. Like she's just always been a volleyball player. Her mom's actually like an Olympic volleyball player. She's kind of a legend, and she's definitely pushed her daughter into this as well. And so now the heroine is like, do I even want this for myself? Like, do I even love it? Like, I don't think I love the game anymore. And so it kind of goes from there with her figuring out what to do with her life. The hero in this one has been dealing with kind of a lot of loss in his life. And so he's always been the one who takes care of other people, and he's kind of been the anchor for so many people in his life. And so the heroine kind of sees that and wants to take care of him for once. So we have that dynamic going on. It is very steamy. It's very quick. So there is that. So yeah, it was 3.5/4 stars for me. Next, I read Best Kept Secret by Emily Silver. This is the first book in a new hockey series from her. And this one I had an arc for, so I decided to jump into it. This one I think I ended up giving it 3 stars, but it's definitely a low 3 stars for me. This author's romances are always very like cutesy and low angst. They're also pretty short as well. I think they're all like under 300 pages, maybe around like the 270-ish mark. Like they're pretty quick to read. So there is that. This one, like I said, it's the start of a new series. So it's going to be a hockey series. And in this one, we follow the hero and the heroine. They're actually in college when the story starts. And so the hero is a student athlete. He's on scholarship at the school. And so he needs to keep his grades up to stay on the team to then eventually get picked up by a pro team. And so that is his goals. But his grades are slipping with a couple of classes classes. So he realizes that he needs a tutor and he needs one fast. So he goes to like the tutor center on campus and sees the heroine there. And so they get paired up because she is a tutor. And so she ends up helping him out. They also have like a little bit of an off limits type of vibe because basically the hero and the heroine, both of their fathers played football and they were like bitter rivals many years ago. I guess they actually had a football series from this author as well. So their stories are kind of over there, which we get a little glimpse of the past of that in the prologue. So there is that. So yeah, they're supposed to be like off limits because their fathers are like rivals. Like I said, the romance is low angst and just very easy. The couple easily fall for one another. They want like a future together. They have that kind of dynamic of their fathers being rivals. So they kind of work through that. Like I said, we do see how their fathers became rivals like 20 years ago in the past in the prologue. That prologue chapter honestly didn't really add anything to the story for me. And I honestly wish it kind of wasn't even there. There is a lot of like homophobic slurs in that as well, of which one of their fathers was the one saying these things. And so I didn't really love that. Then, I mean, his character does, I guess, grow later on in the story. You find out that, you know, he has since changed and realized the error of his ways. But I honestly didn't feel like that was needed. It just felt kind of hurtful and like, I'd rather not read that. So this one as well is kind of touted as like a pro hockey series, but like the hero in this one, he doesn't even get drafted or picked for the pro hockey team that we're going to follow until the very end of the book. So I felt like this was kind of just more of a prequel in general to the series. So we'll see if I check out the rest of the series, but yeah, this one, it was just okay for me. Next up, I had an arc of This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. So Kennedy Ryan is one of my favorite authors of all time. I love her books so much. Before I Let Go, the first book in this series was one of my favorite reads of, I think, 2022. And so I had high hopes for this book. And I will say I was a little disappointed. Like, I ended up giving it 4 stars, and that honestly might be me being generous because I love Kennedy in general, like her books, her writing, her as a person. So I think it'd be more of like 3.5 stars, but like I rounded up to a 4. My issue with this book is that it is just women's fiction and it should have honestly been marketed that way instead, which I don't have a problem with books like that, but I want to know what I'm getting into beforehand so I can like set my expectations a certain way. And so in this one, we basically follow the heroine Soledad, and she is from the same friend group that the heroine in Before I Let Go was. Like, and so the story starts off with the heroine realizing that her husband is a terrible guy and he did some shady things, shady business things. And so the story kicks off with him kind of getting arrested for things that he did. So now she's left with her 3 daughters. Her husband is locked up. And so she's kind of dealing with all of the like ramifications of what her husband did, kind of realizing that her whole life was a lie, kind of going through all of those things, trying to figure out how to provide and pay bills and keep the roof over their head, pay for her daughter's private schools, all of their extracurricular activities, like all of those things are now on her plate as a solo parent. So it's definitely Soledad's journey through all of this. And we catch up with her like multiple months, different times in her life of how she's kind of figuring things out and going from there. There is a romance in here, but I feel like that was definitely not the focus of the story. We see Soledad kind of being interested in the hero for sure. He's a little bit involved of taking her husband down for the things that he did. So we see that story and kind of the, I guess, tension of the relationship from there of like, is he going to be a part of their lives? The hero, he is perfect, like perfect from day one. He is an amazing guy, amazing hero. Like, he is definitely role model hero material of like what everybody wants, where he is super caring and supportive and attentive and like just so perfect. Like, he's honestly a perfect guy, and he is also a co-parent with his ex-wife. And so they have twin sons who are autistic, and so we see him handling that as well. I love the co-parent relationship he had with his ex. And so he's just perfect. Soledad, though, is on her own journey and kind of figuring out if she even wants to be married, be in a romantic relationship again going forward because of all the hurt that she has had. And so we kind of see them off and on throughout like a couple different months that we check in with them. And so yeah, I just kind of wanted a little bit more. Like I said, it's definitely Soledad's journey, and I love a lot of the moments that we get with her, and I'm glad she gets her HEA in the end. It's just that I kind of was expecting more from this story just based off of other books that I've read from Kennedy Ryan in the past. So yeah, definitely solid writing. I loved seeing Soledad's journey. I just feel like I wish we had more time with the hero and the heroine on page and see a little bit more of their romance. There was also some times in here, like with the heroine, she ends up becoming like a social media influencer, and I just felt like some of those things felt a little unbelievable to me of how quickly it got together, how quickly she was able to then pay like thousands of dollars for her housing payment and for her 3 daughters in private school and like all of their extracurriculars. Like, I don't know, maybe since I'm active on social media, like that just felt far-fetched to me of her just like quickly piecing it together, and like how quickly she was able to pull in money from things and get deals and work with major brands and just kind of all of those things. Like, it just felt unbelievable to me that it happened in just these months that were spent with her. Like, I felt like maybe we should have had like a flash forward to a couple years later. Some of these things would have been a little bit more believable to me, but for what it was, I don't know. It was okay, like very solid writing from Kennedy. So there is that. Those are just my thoughts on that one. Then I had an arc of If You Give a Single Dad a Nanny by Anne Einerson, and this one I ended up giving 4 stars too. This one was super cute. So this one is a single dad and nanny romance, and this one, the heroine is the new neighbor of the hero, and it has a grumpy sunshine vibe. So the hero's the grumpy one, she's the sunshine. They end up meeting because her dog ends up running into the hero's yard, and the hero is a single dad, and so his daughter sees the dog and starts playing with the dog, and the hero is like, oh my god, like, why is your dog in my yard? And then the dog runs into the house. It becomes a whole thing, and so he just kind of wants the heroine and her dog out of his house, and it kind of goes from there. And so we see a couple months later where the hero ends up needing a new nanny because his actually quits on him for a family emergency, and so he needs a nanny super fast. And so the heroine ends up offering / the hero's daughter is like, well, I love her, like, can she be my nanny? And so the heroine just says like, yeah, I'll do it. Like, if she's asking, I will definitely help her out. So it goes from there. The heroine is an artist, the hero is a billionaire, so we have that kind of vibe going on as well. It's just cute and fun. Like, if you want single dad and nanny romance, this one definitely fits all of those vibes. Next, I read How You Get the Girl by Anita Kelly. So I've read, I think, the last 3 books from this author now, 3 or 4. And so this one is actually my least favorite of the ones that I've read, and this one I ended up giving 3 stars to. This one, there are moments that I liked in here. Like, I loved the found family and the friend group that we get. There were just some other moments that were just slow. The book felt really long, and I just wasn't as connected to it as I have been with some of the other books from this author. This one was just very low angst, very chill, and that just kind of wasn't the book that I wanted to read at the time I was reading it, so it just didn't hit for me. In this one, we kind of focus on the high school basketball team scene. One of the main characters is a coach. One of the main characters in here is a coach. We also get like some foster family, foster parent rep in here. There's ACE spectrum rep. We have some like lessons for practicing and dating, kind of all of those things. It just kind of was a little too low angst and just very, I don't know, chill, relaxed for me, where I just didn't want that. So I don't know, it was 3 stars, it was okay. Next, I read The Partner Plot by Christina Forrest. This one I had an arc of as well, and I loved A Neighbor Favorite by this author last year. It was one of my favorite romances of the year. This one was super disappointing. I think I ended up giving it 2.5 stars. This one was described as a second chance romance between high school exes. I was so here for that. It's also described in the blurb as a marriage of convenience after they are in Vegas together, and that is what I was expecting, and that is not what I got from this book. Basically in here, the hero and the heroine, they are high school exes. They do see each other in Vegas. She's like a fashion stylist for celebrities and musicians and things like that, and the hero has kind of gone on to be the high school basketball coach of the high school they went to, and he is a high school teacher there as well. So they run into each other in Vegas, and they kind of spend the night together, they dance, all those things, and then they wake up the next morning and they are naked in bed together in Vegas, and they both have wedding rings on, and they kind of freak out for a second, and then they quickly realize, they find a receipt that they went to like a fake marriage ceremony in Vegas, which I guess is a thing you can do. So like, it's not a real marriage. They realize that immediately and kind of like, ugh, thank God, and like go their separate ways. So then we see later on that they're kind of back at their regular lives. The heroine is doing an interview for a fashion magazine, and they're asking some uncomfortable questions or questions about a previous relationship and client that she had, and so she ends up just kind of cutting them off and being like, oh, like I got recently married in Vegas, and so kind of turns the story so it's the focus of that instead. So she's like, nobody in my life's gonna read this fashion magazine, especially not the hero. And so of course that's not true. Like, everybody finds out, and so he's getting like congratulated at school for his recent marriage and kind of all of these things. So then they have to fake be married to one another. We get a lot of the heroine and kind of her journey in life and all of that in the story. I wanted a little bit more from the hero. I wanted a little bit more of time with them together. I honestly didn't see what they saw in one another, both in the past and in the present day. I really just didn't get what either of them liked about one another. I felt like the reason that they were pretending to be married didn't work for me at all. It just didn't hit right. So I don't know. This one was just a major miss for me, sadly. Next, I read The Education of Ivy Leopold by Sierra Simone. So this is the second book in the Markham Hall series. So I think I talked about in my February end of the month wrap up that I read the first book in this trilogy, and so I decided to kind of continue on because I saw that all the audios are now available on Hoopla. So I jumped into this one, was hoping to kind of like mix up my reading that I had been reading, kind of mix it up with like a historical romance erotica. This one was just a major miss for me. I won't be continuing on with the series, so there is that. I gave this one 2 stars. I honestly don't even know why I was expecting more from this book. Like, I knew going in that it was erotica, but I felt like the first one had a little bit of plot as well as like the steamy times and the smut, so like I was kind of expecting that balance again, and this one is just pure smutty scenes all the time, very erotica vibes the whole way through. I was like, where's the plot? What's happening? I don't care. Like, I was just kind of skimming. The mystery element that we kind of had from the first book kind of just fell apart for me, and it just kind of wasn't there anymore. So yeah, this one was a major miss. Like I said, 2 stars. I won't be continuing on with this series. They are super short though. I think the audios are like 4.5 hours, like with without speeding them up or anything. And so there is that. They are on Hoopla, so I would check maybe your library resources if you're interested. But for me, this whole series was just a miss, sadly, which is super sad because it's been on my TBR for literally years. So I don't know. It is what it is. Next, I decided to try a new to me author, so I jumped into The Cruelest Kind of Hate by Celeste. This one was actually just recommended to me on Kindle through Amazon for the day that it released, and I was like looking for a new ebook read, and so I'm like, let me jump into something completely new. So I did that. This is a hockey romance, and this one was a miss for me as well. I gave this one 3 stars. So when people say that books feel like it was written for TikTok, that is this book right here. It had all of the all the tropes thrown in, kind of all the things that would make it popular for TikTok, like the quotes, the things the hero would say, like just all of that like kind of dirty talk and smutty scenes and kind of literally anything to describe everything that they're doing in detail. That was this book in a nutshell. So I just didn't connect with that part of the story as well. I will say there were moments in here that I liked. There was some like grief handling and discussions like that. And I had wanted to be entertained by this one. So like it was 3 stars, but like I won't read from this author again, so there is that. Basically, this is a hockey romance where the hero is a hockey player, the heroine is actually a dance teacher, and her little brother plays hockey, and so she ends up running into the hero by him kind of blocking in her car at the hockey arena, and she just like rams right into his car and gets out of there. So he ends up getting injured during hockey, and his coaches pretty much tell him like, if you want to kind of up your rehab and things like that, you can try to do a dance class to kind of help your flexibility. So he joins the heroine's class, not knowing she's the teacher, not knowing what the class is about, and realizes that it is a pole dancing class. And so he's definitely interested, but not interested in learning how to pole dance. And so he asks if she will kind of help him on the side since she does other dance as well. And then in return, he will help her brother with like hockey lessons. So it kind of goes from there. He is the kind of sunshiny one. She is more grumpy. So we do have that. Like I said, I liked some of the handling of grief. The heroine's mother in here has MS, and she's been the one who's had to become the caretaker for her little brother. So we have that going on. A lot of grief in here, a lot of loss. There's a lot of content warnings in here. So definitely check my Goodreads review if you want to see all of those. This one, it was just okay. Next, I had an audio ALC of Swift and Saddled by Lila Sage. So this is the second book in her Small Town series, which her first book was Done and Dusted. And that one was just okay for me. It was small town and kind of like Western vibes. So I decided to jump into this one, and I'm glad that I did because I did like this one more. I gave it 4 stars. This one just hit better for me. I don't know if it was because I listened to it on audio or if I just liked the characters more in this one. So basically in here we have Opposites Attract, where the heroine is a city girl. The hero is a small town cowboy, and so she ends up coming to the small town because she is an interior decorator, and she's going to be helping with the remodel of a house on his family's ranch property. And so they kind of meet that way and kind of instantly hit it off and just kind of like dance around one another for a bit. I just really enjoyed this one. I liked the hero, I liked the heroine, I liked seeing her kind of learn things around the ranch. I would say low angst for this author's books, but like cute and fun, and like I said, the audio was really good, so there is that. So then I decided to jump into Sanctuary by Clare Kent. So if you know me, you know I love Clare Kent's post-apocalyptic romance series, and so this is the latest book, I think book 6 in her Kindled post-apocalyptic series. This one came out, I think, at the very end of December of last year. And so I just been kind of saving this one for a rainy day / to get to, and it sadly didn't work for me. This one I ended up giving 3.5 / 4 stars. Most of the books in the series could be read as standalones, but you're going to get more out of them, of course, if you read the whole series and kind of know what's going on, see these different characters. But the romances, for the most part, are pretty isolated just because of the situation. So basically, this whole series is set in like near future Earth, where there was this global catastrophe. Basically, an asteroid came down, took out the entire continent of Europe, causing like these mass catastrophe effects across the entire planet. And so most of the books take place like 5 to 6 years later. I think this one we're already caught up now to 8 years later. And so we see these people, it's very much like survival stories, very gritty, very dark situations going on, and like very little people left. And like the ones who are, there's like some rough around the edges people and just kind of people taking advantage of things. Kind of like think of any post-apocalyptic like TV series, movie, video game you've played, kind of those vibes in a book series. So I do love it, but this one in particular just didn't hit for me super well. Basically in this author's books, we usually get like very cold and stoic heroes. The hero in this one was a little different. He was a lot more like a charming and talkative. So we did have that. Maybe I missed like the cold and stoic heroes, I don't know. But the heroine in this one as well, she basically had to do anything she could to take care of her and her sister, which her sister is the previous book in the series. So it's definitely recommended to read at least these two together so you get kind of the better appreciation of her character's story. So basically the heroine, she pretty much did whatever she could to help her and her sister survive after the impact happened. So she was using her body and kind of just get in with different men, different groups who would help them, protect them, and, you know, feed and take care of them. So she used her body a ton, got taken advantage of as well, and so she definitely has a lot of trauma from that. And then we see the hero, he has some trauma in his past as well. He lost his wife and his children, and so we see kind of these two connect. Basically in here, they both kind of do the same work, so they're both like messengers or couriers where they go and deliver things, pick up things, trade notes, do all of that with different communities. So the heroine's kind of pushing on the hero's turf, or what he sees as his turf, and so they kind of get into this little like argument, or she like can't stand him. So eventually they end up going, or she goes to like one of his regulars and is like, you know, I will do the jobs for less than he is getting paid from you, so like kind of undercutting him. And so he shows up as well, and the person that they're talking to is like, well, how about we do a competition, like whoever can go get me what I need the fastest, like that will be who I work with in the future. So they set off kind of as a competition, and then eventually they end up getting snowed in and trapped in a place together, and so kind of working together and taking care of one another. And so from there we see their kind of romance start and pick up. The romance in here does come together pretty easily, pretty quickly, and so from there we kind of see other plot and things happening in the story instead. And so I wasn't as invested in this couple, or kind of, you know, there was no tension, like they were just together quickly. They both did have those traumas to work through, but I felt like it just kind of, like it was just easy for them. Kind of the last few from this series I haven't loved as much as some of the earlier ones hit for me, so I don't know. I'm still invested because I do love this author's post-apocalyptic series, and so I'll keep reading them, but this one just wasn't a favorite for me. Next I had an audio ALC of Late Bloomer by Maisy, and this one I sadly ended up giving 2 stars to. It was a major miss for me, which I was super sad because the cover is stunning. I was super excited for a sapphic romance from this author, but this one just didn't work for me kind of on any level. So basically I have read this author before. I actually read their debut romance that they wrote, I think like 3 or 4 years ago at this point. The author was like an Instagrammer before becoming an author, and so I read an arc of this one 3 or 4 years ago now at this point, and so that one was like a dentist romance. And I remember at the time thinking it was charming and I liked it. It was something different. I know she's had a ton of other releases since then. I just never kept up with them, and so I decided to jump into this one just because, like I said, I got the audio ALC, so I'm like, let me give it a try. Basically the setup is that one of the heroines ends up winning the lottery, and so she has all these people coming out of the woodwork kind of asking for money, asking for help, and she's just like a kind soul, and so she gives them whatever they ask. So she's definitely getting taken advantage of, and she's like, okay, to protect myself and to save myself because I can't say no, like I am going to invest all my money in this property instead, so my money's tied up, and like when people come to ask for money I can be like, nope, don't have it. So she does that and ends up purchasing this failing flower farm in North Carolina, and so she goes there to the place, and then the other heroine ends up showing up and kind of is like, I'm the rightful owner of this place. And it becomes this whole thing. There is like opposites attract and forced proximity and all of that going on. I was just never invested in the characters as like people on their own, let alone as a couple, and so this one just didn't really do anything for me. Kind of the actions and the conversations with the characters, like it all just felt very forced, very cliche, and so it just didn't work for me, which, I mean, maybe this author isn't for me, which is fine, so I know that now going forward. This one doesn't come out, I think, until April 16th. Yeah, April 16th. So there is that. I mean, it didn't work for me. The cover's gorgeous, so yeah, 2 stars. Next I jumped into Forever After All by Katarina. So I was just jumping into a bunch of different things this month and hoping that something would stick. So I decided to jump into some books that had been on my Kindle for the longest, and so I have a whole video where I tried 3 of those. So this is one of them. And this one didn't work for me. It was 3 stars. Basically, this is a marriage of convenience, billionaire romance. It has age gap. Basically, I describe this one as like kind of a Cinderella story. If Cinderella ran out of money, ran out of options, and decides to sell her body to save her family and ends up in a marriage of convenience instead. So this is definitely nothing against Katarina because I love some of her other books. I have read, I think, most of hers. I've read her whole Off Limits series and her Windsor's series. So this one, it was kind of a standalone that I was just kind of saving. I love the cover, but it just didn't work for me, sadly. So there is that, but like I've loved others from this author before. So yeah, basically in here, the heroine's mother is in a coma. She wants to save her. Her father has kind of had her declared brain dead. He has gotten remarried to this like kind of evilish stepmom, and the heroine ends up kind of leaving behind her wealthy family because she's determined to save her mom and nobody else wants to help. And so now she has run out of money. She's ran out of hope. Her father won't help her. So she ends up kind of going to this club and is like, all right, I will sell my body for money. This is my last resort to save my mom. So she is going in there with that mindset, and then the hero shows up there and he kind of knows her because she was friends with his brother growing up, and so he decides to save her because kind of around the same time the hero had found out from his family that he's from a wealthy family as well. Like for him to inherit the family business, he needs to get married, and so he's like, this is perfect. Marriage of convenience, let's do this thing. So it goes from there. This one is just very over the top, very dramatic, very wild. I will say the first 2/3 I was enjoying, but the last third definitely lost me. So yeah, 3 stars. The next 2 I talked about more in depth as well in that video of the books I had on my TBR the longest or whatever. So the next one is Love and Hockey Hockey by Monty J. This one I gave 4 stars to. This one is angsty and dramatic and very like flowery writing. I did really like this one, so I want to check out more from the author in the future. Basically, this is a hockey romance where the hero and the heroine, they both play hockey. The heroine is actually raised by her single dad, who's like this hockey legend, and the hero has been in her life for quite a few years because he's actually a teammate and friend of her father. So they first meet when she's 10 and the hero is 18, and he's a rookie on her dad's hockey team. And so we have that dynamic of them being in each other's lives for a very long time. And so each chapter we kind of get different years in their life and see how their relationship has changed and evolved. So if you're not a fan of the hero kind of being in the life of the heroine since she was young, maybe avoid this one. Didn't bother me as much. So yeah, this one just like very angsty and very like this is the wrong time, or like they are trying to keep the relationship a secret. Lots of like hearts hurting, lots of trauma and all of that in this one. I will say there are some very heavy content warnings in here, so definitely know that going in. I put them in my Goodreads review as well as I talk more in depth about them in the other video I was talking about, the 3 books that were on my Kindle the longest. So definitely check out there if you want to. Then I jumped into Passion and Venom by Shor Williams. So this is the first book in her Venom trilogy. This one is dark romance. It is mafia kind of cartel related. This one I ended up giving 3 stars to. I fully expected to love this one because I know so many people who love this series. This one, it just felt, I don't know, it just felt like there was violence for the sake of violence and it didn't add anything to the story. I wasn't a fan of some of the punishments and the torture and kind of those scenes that we get in here that didn't add to anything for the story for me. I felt like they were just in there for shock value. Basically, the heroine ends up getting abducted on her wedding day where she gets married to her new husband. They're in the car on the way to the honeymoon and he gets killed in front of her, and then she gets taken and held captive for a week, and then eventually she figures out who's holding her captive, who of course becomes the hero, and she lives with him in his house, but he still kind of tortures her and messes with her and does a lot of head games and things like that while she's in his house. So definitely a ton of content warning in this one, a lot of graphic things. So just know that I have them again listed in my Goodreads, as well as I talk about them more in depth in that other video again that I talked about. So yeah, it was okay. Like I didn't love it like I expected. I thought it was okay. A little cliche at times and a little over the top and dramatic, but I was like invested enough to go into the second book to figure out where it went from there. So that's the next one we're going to jump into. All right, so next up is Venom and Ecstasy by Shor Williams, and this is the second book in the Venom trilogy. I did like this one a little bit more. It was still 3 stars, but it'd be like more 3.5 for me. Basically, we catch up with the heroine and the hero right after events in book 1. So you definitely have to read them in order. This one, like I said, it worked a little bit better for me, but also I wasn't super invested or loving it. So I had planned to read the 3rd book, but maybe now I actually won't because like, I don't know, who has time to read books that they're not like super loving? So I don't know, 3 stars for this series overall for me. Then I decided to jump in to some new to me authors, which I'll have a video kind of talking more about all of these books as well. That's coming up, I think, on Friday this week. So there is that to look forward to. But first up is Rushed by Aurora Reynolds. This is a small town romance and takes place in Montana, where the heroine was basically jilted right before her wedding, like a couple days before. So she decides to continue on to the honeymoon / on to this couples retreat that they had planned. So she goes there solo and basically is partnered up with the owner of this kind of like rugged Montana retreat. So this one was 2 stars for me. It was a miss. I didn't love it. Then I jumped into One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig, and I know this book is super hyped. People super love it, and I am so glad. For me, it didn't work. I gave it 2 stars. This book I was kind of on the fence about checking out, but I decided to just give it a go because so many people love it. I've seen it on my Instagram feed a ton. So I put on an audio hold on Libby and it finally came in. So this is a YA gothic fantasy. I like YA fantasies at times, and I do love gothic reads. I always have. So I was excited to get into this one, but this one was just a miss for me on pretty much every level. I felt like the world building and the whole like plot of everything was just a major miss, and so lacking. Wasn't a fan of the characters. I felt like they were one dimension, very surface level, and because of that, I never felt connected to them. Also, the magic system was just a major miss from me. I mean, I'm not continuing on the series, so there's that. So 2 stars for me. So then I jumped into an audio ALC of A Funny Story by Emily Henry. This one comes out, I think, in April, maybe the end of April, and I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4.5 stars. I rounded down to 4 though. So I have read the last, I don't know, what, 4 or 5 contemporary romances this author has kind of written and published in the last 4 years, and the first 2, Beach Read and the People We Meet on Vacation ones, still remain my favorites, and the last 2 have been kind of misses for me. So I jumped into this one kind of with low expectations, and surprisingly, I really enjoyed this one. So this one has a really fun premise where the hero and the heroine are both left by their significant others because those 2 end up pairing up together, and so the hero and the heroine end up sharing an apartment and become roommates. So basically in this one, the heroine's gearing up to her wedding when the story starts, and her fiance ends up telling her after his bachelor party, like, hey, actually, I can't go through with this wedding. I just realized I have feelings for my best friend who is a woman, and like, we want to try this out. So like, we can't get married anymore. Also, you're going to have to like move out because she's going to move in with me. And so the hero actually ends up showing up at her house that same night. And because he was the boyfriend of that best friend of the heroine's fiance. And so since those two are off like paired up now, he's like, oh my God, what do we do? So she's like, well, while you're here, they took off together. So do you have a room for me to stay in? And so they become roommates and we catch up to them quite some time later. And so it was just really fun. There was some moments in here where I was laughing and where it was super charming. I love the hero in here. He's like the sweetest thing ever. I just love seeing the whole journey of both of the characters and kind of their whole story. So yeah, this one was a fun one. I feel like if Emily Henry has kind of been a miss for you for the last few of her books, maybe check this one out because this one did work for me. Next, I had an arc of Homewrecker by Sarah Kate. So this is the second book in her Good Brothers series, I think it's called. And so this one is a marriage in crisis MMF romance with cheating as well. I haven't loved this series from the author, but I love her books in general. So I like keep trying. So this one actually ended up, I think, being like 3.5 stars for me. Basically, the hero and the heroine we first follow, they're married. They've been together since college. They actually cheated on other people to be together back then. And so now we catch up to them. They've been married, I think like 7 years. They have a daughter. They're trying for their second baby. They're dealing with infertility, kind of all of those things. Their marriage is just like falling apart, like, but neither of them want to say it out loud or talk to one another. So there's a ton of miscommunication amongst them, which I mean, I get it, but also like at the same time, I don't know, just like say what you want. So enter the other hero. He actually works at the club that's featured in the first book. And so he is a sex worker, an escort, whatever you want to call it. And so he ends up kind of needing a place to stay because his house got burned down. And so his boss, who is the other hero's brother, is like, well, hey, my brother has like an apartment / a room for rent on his property. Like if you want to go live there, maybe he'll let you move in. So he does. And he knows the hero as well because he was friends with their other brother as teenagers. And so we have this kind of like complex situation going on, or hopefully that makes sense. So very, very quickly, which was kind of one of my problems, I wanted more tension, more of it drawn out instead of just like very quickly, the heroine and this new hero in her life end up hitting it off. And she's just like very much wanting to get together with him. So we have that happening. And then her husband is old to the hero as well and kind of dealing with that as well and kind of discovering that he's possibly bisexual. So we have that kind of going on. This one, I just felt like it was too insta-lusty, insta-lovey. And I felt like the hero who's kind of brought in to kind of save their marriage, like he kind of volunteers for it, or they ask him to help out, like help them, you know, explain what they want from their partner and kind of discover their sexuality and kind of all of those things. He's brought in / volunteers for it, but I felt like they were kind of taking advantage of him. It just felt very insta-lusty of both of them with him. There also wasn't a ton of time of them three together, I felt like, and I don't know, I just wasn't invested. Like I wasn't sold on them being a throuple together. Also, like the other hero brought into their marriage, like he also was like the teenage boyfriend of the married guy hero's like little brother growing up, and I felt like that wasn't needed. It didn't add anything to the plot. I just felt like that was kind of weird. Yeah, like it was just okay for me, honestly. Comes out I think March 25th, so I don't know. There's that. It just didn't work for me. Next, I jumped into The Prisoner's Throne by Holly Black. So basically Holly Black actually came up to Alaska, which is super rare. Nobody ever comes up here, so she came up here for a book signing, and I was like, I'm totally going to that. So I'll insert like a little photo here that I went and got to see her, get my books signed, and then I got to pick up this book as well. So while I'm not like a major super fan, like I was just excited anybody was coming up to Alaska. That's an author that I know, so I went to the signing. So I did read this book as well. I really enjoyed this one. I think I gave it 4 stars. Honestly, I was just here for the Jude and Carden little like tidbits and all the moments we get with them because we got a lot of them in this book, which I enjoyed. We see a lot of just like secrets and family relationships and kind of just all of these fae things going on in Holly Black's world. Definitely felt long though, and it dragged there. Not like an all-time favorite, but like it was entertaining and I had a good time with it. Then I decided to jump into Piper Rain because I did read from this author duo last month and really enjoyed them. So I read their P. Rain book, which was Moonlit Thorns, which I think that's just their Kindle Unlimited pen name, I found out. And their other books are not available on Kindle Unlimited for the Piper Rain name, but they are all on Hoopla, like all the audios. So I decided to jump into a few of those because I was like, okay, I like this author duo. Let's see if their kind of writing style matches up with their different pen names. And I will say I didn't love these 2 next ones as much as I hoped to, or that I liked the other book that I read from them. So the first one I read was My Lucky Number 13. This is a hockey romance, and this one I ended up giving it 3 stars too. So basically in this one, the hero is always had like luck. He's like nicknamed Shamrock and all of those things on the ice. And so now though he has gone 8 games without scoring, and so he thinks he's lost his luck. And so finally he ends up scoring at a game. And so his teammates are like, oh my God, whatever you did before the game today, you need to do that again and recreate it because, you know, hockey superstitions. And so he's never been one who's into superstitions, but he's willing to like give it a try because obviously something changed. And so he's like, well, I just met this like amazing girl who I thought I was hitting it off with, but she's actually the date of my agent, who I think is a good friend. And so I'm not gonna like go there, but she did like throw a drink in my face. So maybe I need to go see her and have her continuously throw drinks in my faces before games. So that's what happens. And then he keeps scoring. And so it kind of goes from there with them ending up becoming friends. She eventually like was just kind of casually dating his agent. And so she splits up, kind of stops seeing him. And then they of course can become a thing. Just very easy, very low angst. The book was short. So yeah, 3 stars. Then I saw that this author duo also had a small town series that's set in Alaska. If you know me, I live in Alaska. So I decided to give it a try. I was a little wary though, because I'm always a little wary of books that take place in Alaska, because I feel like they're very romanticized and maybe not like a true vibe of the feel of Alaska. So there is that. So this one is called The Problem with Second Chances, and the covers are really pretty. So I decided to give it a try. Like I said, they're on Hoopla. This one I gave 3 stars to as well, and I just didn't really love it. I think both of these audiobooks were like 6-ish, 6.5 hours, which is pretty short. So I decided to give this one a try. It is a small town, a second chance, set in Alaska. Basically, the hero and the heroine were childhood friends that became more, and they ended up going separate ways, with him moving away to become a professional soccer player and her staying in their small town. Now they are back around one another because he came back to participate in their kind of mutual friends' wedding, where she's going to be the maid of honor, he's going to be the best man. So there's lots of them like getting together for the wedding prep and all of those events and activities, being around one another. It was just okay for me, like 3 stars, kind of just basic. I've read this premise before. Didn't feel like super Alaska-y to me. It just kind of like could have been anywhere USA. So it was okay. Then the last book I read was the book club book for Historical Hellions, which is a book club I'm a co-host for. We read historical romances published before the year 2000. We always have a live chat every month. And so this month's book was Tempt Me with Kisses by Phoebe Kahn. This one was a major miss for me. I think I'm going to give it like 1 star, which is like, I rarely give out like 1 star. I think I gave out 1 star last year. Can't even remember the time before that. It was just a major miss for me. I was hoping for so much more because the cover is stunning, and it was a hot mess. Didn't even feel like a romance. We follow like 25 million characters, I feel like. It takes place in California in the 1850s, and we see the heroine immediately fall in love and lust after the hero when she sees him, and it kind of quickly goes from there. Just a hot mess. Definitely content and warning in this one for miscarriage on a page, and it was just like a hot mess. Like they end up becoming basically compromised. They get into this marriage, and then they both kind of don't love one another, but they both want love from one another. Just a hot mess with some of the things that were said were just so uncomfy and like not a good look for the hero, for some of the characters. Like I just did not enjoy this at all. And yeah, it was just a miss. Didn't feel very romantic. We follow a ton of characters, too many characters, just so many things thrown into this book. I honestly hated it. As I was reading it, I was like, okay, this is going to be maybe like a 3 star. And then it kind of went down to like, this is probably a 2 star. And then as I was reading it more things kept happening and being thrown in. I was like, okay, this is like a disgrace to any book I've ever given 2 star. Like this has to be a 1 star. So I think that's actually what I'm going to settle on. We actually have our live show tonight. So I'm curious what the other hosts and people who read it thought, because I don't know, it was just a major miss for me. So yeah, there is that, but that's kind of what happens when you read these older historicals. All right, so those are the 24 books that I read for the first half of March. Definitely let me know in the comments if you read any of these books, if you plan to read any of these books, if you've had any good reads this month. Definitely let me know, because I'm obviously lacking and needing some good reads. I'm really hoping that at the end of March brings it together and I have some good reads then. If you want to leave me an emoji instead in the comments to let me know that you watched this video, leave me like the 4-leaf clover emoji, because today is St. Patrick's Day when I am filming this. So yeah, definitely do that. If you haven't done so yet, make sure to like and subscribe so don't miss out on any of my future videos, and I will see you in my next one.